He thought she was just a poor, orphan librarian he'd rescued from obscurity. He thought he could toss her aside like last season's couture when a younger, flashier model came along. Alexander Blackwood, the tech mogul of the century, handed his wife divorce papers on their 5th anniversary, believing he was the one holding all the cards. But he made one fatal calculation. He didn't check who his wife really was. He didn't know that the penniless woman he was kicking out wasn't just a nobody. She was the heir to the very banking dynasty that owned his debt. This is the story of the most brutal divorce in high society, and the royal reveal that brought a billionaire to his knees. The air inside the private dining room at Per Se, overlooking Columbus Circle, was cold, colder than the vintage Dom Perignon chilling in the silver bucket. This was supposed to be a celebration. 5 years. 5 years since Alexander Blackwood, the genius behind the Titan AI microchip, had married Victoria, the quiet, unassuming assistant archivist he'd met at a charity library fundraiser. Victoria sat with her hands folded in her lap. She was wearing a simple navy dress she'd bought at Macy's 3 years ago. It was elegant but faded, a stark contrast to the glinting Rolex Daytona on Alexander's wrist, a watch that cost more than the college tuition of the waitstaff serving them. "Happy anniversary, Alex," Victoria said softly, sliding a small, wrapped box across the table. Inside was a first edition of The Great Gatsby, something she had spent 6 months tracking down. She knew he loved stories about self-made men. Alexander didn't reach for the box. He didn't even look at it. He swirled his wine, looking out the window at the Manhattan skyline, as if he owned it. In a way, he did. His company had just gone public on the NASDAQ, valuing his net worth at $4.2 billion. "We need to talk, Victoria," Alexander said, his voice devoid of warmth. It was the tone he used when firing a VP of operations. Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. "Is it about the merger? I know you've been stressed." "It's not the merger," he cut her off. He reached into his bespoke Brioni jacket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope. It wasn't a card. It was too heavy, too legal. He slid it across the table, pushing her gift aside until it nearly fell off the edge. "I'm filing for divorce." The silence that followed was deafening. The clinking of silverware from the main dining room seemed miles away. Victoria stared at the envelope, her breath hitching. "Divorce? But why? Alex, we don't we anymore, Victoria," he sighed, looking bored. "Look at you, and then look at me. When I married you, I was a startup founder, needing a stable, quiet wife to make me look grounded to investors. I needed a nurse with a purse, emotionally speaking. But now, I'm Alexander Blackwood. I dine with heads of state. I spend weekends in Monaco." He leaned forward, his eyes cruel. "And you're still just a librarian. You wear off-the-rack clothes. You don't know how to talk to the wives of the BlackRock executives. You embarrass me, Victoria. You're too plain." Victoria felt the tears pricking her eyes, but she willed them not to fall. She had been raised to never show weakness in front of an adversary, a lesson her grandmother had drilled into her. "Is there someone else?" she asked, her voice steady. Alexander smirked. He pulled out his phone and swiped the screen, turning it to face her. The photo showed Alexander on a yacht in Saint-Tropez, his arm around a woman with platinum blonde hair and a dress made of little more than diamonds. "Chantel," Alexander said, the name rolling off his tongue like honey. "She's an influencer, 20 million followers. She just signed a brand deal with Gucci. She fits the brand, Victoria. She fits the life I've built. You fit the life I left behind." Victoria looked at the photo, then back at the man she had loved for 5 years. She remembered nursing him through the flu when his company was nearly bankrupt. She remembered signing the loan documents for their first apartment because his credit was shot. "You want me to leave?" Victoria stated. "Tonight," Alexander said. "The prenup is in the envelope. It's generous, considering you brought nothing into this marriage. You get $50,000 and you keep your whatever personal items you have. But I want you out of the penthouse by midnight. Chantel is moving in tomorrow morning." $50,000. It was an insult. It was what Alexander spent on a weekend trip to Vegas. Victoria reached for the envelope. She didn't scream. She didn't throw the wine in his face. She simply opened it, took the Mont Blanc pen he offered, and flipped to the back page. "You're not going to read it?" Alexander asked, surprised. He had expected begging. He had prepared for a scene. He had his lawyer, Harrison Wells of the prestigious firm Cravath, Swain and Moore, on speed dial just in case she caused a fuss. "No," Victoria said. She signed her name with a flourish, an intricate, practiced signature that looked far too regal for a simple librarian. Victoria A. H. Blackwood. She stood up. "I don't want your money, Alex. Keep the $50,000. You're going to need it more than I will." Alexander laughed, a barking, harsh sound. "I'm a billionaire, darling. I think I'll be fine. Just make sure you leave your keys with the doorman." Victoria turned and walked out of the restaurant. She didn't look back. She didn't see Alexander toss her unopened gift into the trash bin as the waiter poured him another glass of champagne. She walked out onto the street, the cold New York wind hitting her face. She took a deep breath. She wasn't sad. She was relieved. The charade was finally over. She reached into her purse and pulled out a phone, not the standard iPhone Alexander insisted she use, but a sleek, encrypted device made of black titanium. She dialed a number. "It's done," she said into the phone, her voice shifting from the timid wife to something colder, more commanding. He served the papers. "Activate the protocol." A deep, British voice answered on the other end. "Very good, Your Highness. The car is around the corner." Alexander returned to the penthouse at the 157 tower 2 hours later, buzzing with adrenaline and champagne. He expected to find Victoria crying in the hallway or packing frantic boxes. Instead, the apartment was silent. The closet, huge walk-in, filled with his designer suits, had a small section in the corner where Victoria kept her things. It was empty. The bathroom counter was cleared of her drugstore moisturizers. "Good riddance," he muttered, loosening his tie. He walked to the living room, pouring himself a scotch from the crystal decanter. He walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over Central Park. His phone buzzed. It was Chantel. "Is the mouse gone, baby? Can I come over?" He typed back. "Coast is clear. Come home." He felt like the king of the world. He was free. He had his company, his money, and now the trophy wife he deserved. Meanwhile, 3 blocks away, a blacked-out Rolls-Royce Phantom idled in a loading zone. The license plate was diplomatic. CD 19001. Victoria sat in the back seat, the shabby librarian demeanor gone. She had pulled her hair out of its messy bun, letting golden waves cascade down her shoulders. She removed the cheap reading glasses, revealing sharp, piercing blue eyes. "We have secured a suite at the Pierre for tonight, ma'am," the driver said. "And your grandmother, the Grand Duchess, is on the secure line." Victoria took the phone. "Grand-mère." "Victoria." A stern, elderly voice crackled over the line. "Is it finished? Is the American boy out of your system?" "Yes, Grand-mère," Victoria said, looking out the window as they passed the building she had called home for 5 years. "He divorced me. He thinks I'm destitute." "Good," the Grand Duchess of Valoria replied. Valoria was a small, incredibly wealthy European principality, nestled between France and Switzerland, known for two things: its absolute privacy laws and its ownership of the Royal Sovereign Trust, the largest private lending equity in the world. "You have played your little game of normal life long enough, Victoria," her grandmother continued. "It is time to come home, or at least take your rightful place. The Board of Directors meeting for the Trust is next week in Zurich. We are reviewing the high-risk portfolios." Victoria's eyes narrowed. "High-risk portfolios? Does that include the tech sector?" "Indeed. Specifically, a massive loan taken out by a company called Titan AI. They are over-leveraged and requesting a restructuring to avoid bankruptcy. The CEO is a reckless man named Blackwood, I believe." A slow, dangerous smile spread across Victoria's face. Alexander hadn't just divorced his wife. He had divorced Princess Victoria Adelaide of Valoria, the primary shareholder of the bank that held the mortgage on his company, his penthouse, and his private jet. "Don't restructure the loan, Grandmère," Victoria said, her voice turning to ice. "I'll handle the Titan AI account personally. I'm staying in New York for a while longer. I have some business to attend to." "Very well," the Grand Duchess said, "but you cannot stay at the Pierre forever. We have opened the townhouse on the Upper East Side. The staff has been flown in. And Victoria." "Yes?" "Burn those clothes. You look like a peasant." The next morning, Alexander woke up to the smell of burnt toast. Chantel was in the kitchen, wearing one of his dress shirts, trying to figure out how to use the $10,000 espresso machine. "This thing is stupid," she giggled, tossing a coffee pod into the sink. "Let's just go out. I want to go to Bergdorf's. I need a dress for the tech gala next week." The tech gala, the biggest event of the year. Alexander had been planning to debut Chantel there. It would be his victory lap. "Buy whatever you want," Alexander said, slapping a Centurion card, the black card, on the counter. "I have a meeting with the bank today. Just a formality to clear up some credit lines for the divorce settlement." He kissed her and left. He felt invincible. He arrived at his office at Titan AI, a glass fortress in Hudson Yards. His CFO, Marcus Vance, wait no, Vance is forbidden, let's use Marcus O'Connell, was waiting for him, looking pale. "Alex, we have a problem," Marcus said, pacing the office. "What problem? The stock is up 2%, Alexander said, sitting in his Herman Miller chair and putting his feet up. "It's the loan," Marcus said, sweating. "The construction loan for the new data center in Texas, and the liquidity line for the merger. It was all held by Geneva Holdings. So, we pay the interest. We're good." "No." Marcus slammed a file on the desk. "Geneva Holdings was just acquired this morning, bought out by a parent company. They've audited our accounts and triggered the character clause in our contract." "The what?" Alexander frowned. "The character clause. It's an old-school banking rule. If the CEO engages in publicly scandalous behavior or financial instability, the lender can call in the full amount of the loan immediately. They're claiming your sudden divorce and the tabloid rumors about Chantel constitute a risk." Alexander laughed. "That's ridiculous. Who bought the debt?" "Some hedge fund. I'll call the manager and buy him a steak dinner." Marcus shook his head, looking terrified. "It's not a hedge fund, Alex. It's the Royal Sovereign Trust of Valoria. They don't eat steak dinners with people like us. They eat countries." "Valoria?" Alexander rolled his eyes. "That tiny place in Europe? Who runs it?" "The royal family. Specifically, the assets are managed by the heir apparent. They are notoriously ruthless. They've demanded a meeting, Friday, at their New York headquarters." "Fine." Alexander fixed his cufflinks. I'll charm them. I always do. Whoever this prince or princess is, they'll be begging to invest more by the time I'm done." He didn't know that the prince or princess he was going to meet was the woman whose anniversary gift was currently sitting in the trash can of a restaurant on Columbus Circle. While Alexander was busy trying to explain high finance to Chantel, who thought liquidity had something to do with the smoothie bar at Equinox, Victoria was stepping back into a world she had forsaken 5 years ago. The Valorian diplomatic townhouse on East 73rd Street was a fortress of old-world luxury, a stark contrast to the glass and steel sterility of Alexander's penthouse. The moment she stepped through the wrought-iron doors, the librarian vanished completely. A staff of 10, who had flown in overnight on a private Gulfstream G650, stood in a receiving line. "Welcome home, Your Royal Highness," said Bartholomew, the elderly butler who had taught her how to ride a bicycle 20 years ago. Victoria nodded, her posture instantly straightening, her chin lifting. "Thank you, Bartholomew. It's good to be back. I need a full audit of the Titan AI portfolio on my desk within the hour. And Bartholomew?" "Yes, ma'am." "Burn the clothes in that suitcase, all of them." Upstairs, in a master suite, larger than her entire apartment with Alexander, Victoria stood before a floor-to-ceiling mirror. She looked at the woman looking back, too thin, pale, eyes dimmed by years of playing small so Alexander could feel big. She picked up a phone and dialed a number in Paris. It answered on the first ring. "Jean-Luc," she said in flawless French. "It's Victoria. I need a wardrobe. Not for a party. For a war." Jean-Luc Dubois, the legendary couturier who had dressed every European queen for the past 3 decades, didn't ask questions. By the next afternoon, trunks arrived containing thousands of dollars of bespoke tailoring, structured blazers that acted as armor, silk blouses in deep jewel tones, and stiletto heels sharp enough to draw blood. Victoria spent the next 2 days in the townhouse library, surrounded by financial reports on Titan AI. It was worse than her grandmother had let on. Alexander was a visionary in tech, yes, but he was a gambler in business. He had leveraged his entire empire on the success of a new microchip that wasn't even fully tested, to fund his lavish lifestyle with Chantel, the yacht rentals, the suite at the Ritz Paris, the diamond necklaces. He had dipped into company operating funds. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. It was perfect. On Thursday night, the night before the big meeting, Victoria sat by the fireplace, sipping a 1982 Chateau Margaux. Bartholomew entered softly, holding a silver tray with an iPad on it. "The latest press, Your Highness. I thought you should see it." Victoria swiped the screen. It was page 6. The headline screamed, "Billionaire Tech King dumps frumpy wife for TikTok Queen." There was a photo of Alexander and Chantel leaving Nobu the night before. Chantel was wearing a dress that was barely there, hanging onto Alexander's arm and laughing, flashing a massive yellow diamond ring on her finger. A ring Victoria recognized. It was the engagement ring Alexander had claimed he couldn't afford to buy her 5 years ago, the one he said was too ostentatious. Victoria zoomed in on Alexander's face in the photo. He looked smug, victorious. "He looks happy," Bartholomew noted quietly. "He looks," Victoria said, setting the glass down with a sharp click, "like a man standing on a trap door who doesn't know who has their hand on the lever." She stood up, the silk of her emerald green dressing gown flowing around her. "Lay out the navy Dior suit for tomorrow, the vintage one, and bring me the sapphire brooch from the Valorian Crown collection, the one with the crest. The lion rampant, ma'am? Isn't that a bit aggressive for a business meeting?" Victoria smiled, a look that would have terrified Alexander Blackwood had he seen it. I'm not going to a business meeting, Bartholomew. I'm going to an execution. Friday morning arrived with grey skies over Manhattan. Alexander was irritated. Chantel had kept him up half the night, filming a Get Ready With Me video for TikTok in their bathroom, and his driver was 5 minutes late. Just get me to the Seagram building, Alexander snapped at the driver, once he finally got in. I need to deal with these European bankers and get back to real work. His CFO, Marcus O'Connell, was already waiting in the lobby of the Seagram building, clutching his briefcase like a life preserver. They're making us wait upstairs, Alex, Marcus whispered nervously as they got into the elevator. The Royal Sovereign Trust takes up the top 3 floors. It's intense. Alexander adjusted his tie in the elevator reflection. Relax, Marcus. They're just money guys. They want reassurance. I'll give them the 5-year projection, throw around some buzzwords like synergy and quantum integration, and we'll walk out with an extended credit line. Watch the master at work. The elevator doors opened onto the 38th floor, and the atmosphere immediately shifted. It was dead silent. The floors were polished Italian marble, the walls panelled in dark, ancient mahogany. There were no open-plan desks, no ping-pong tables, no tech-bro energy. Just oil paintings of severe-looking men in 18th-century military uniforms. A severe woman in a grey suit met them. Mr. Blackwood, Mr. O'Connell, follow me. She didn't offer them coffee. She didn't smile. She led them to a massive set of double doors and motioned for them to wait on a hard wooden bench outside. 45 minutes passed. Alexander was fuming. He checked his Rolex every 30 seconds. He pulled out his phone to check his emails, but there was zero signal in the hallway. A subtle power play. This is outrageous, Alexander hissed. Do they know who I am? My time is worth $10,000 a minute. Alex, keep your voice down, Marcus begged. Finally, the double doors opened. The assistant beckoned them inside. The boardroom was cavernous. The windows offered a panoramic view of the city, but the room felt hermetically sealed. At the far end of a polished table, long enough to land a plane on, sat Alistair Pembroke, the CEO of the Royal Sovereign Trust. He was a man in his 60s with steel-grey hair and a suit that cost more than Alexander's car. Alexander put on his best winning smile and strode forward, hand extended. Mr. Pembroke, a pleasure. Apologies for the delay. I know how busy we all are. Pembroke didn't stand up. He didn't shake the proffered hand. He just pointed to a chair at the far end of the table, 20 feet away. Sit down, Mr. Blackwood. Alexander blinked, his smile faltering. He sat. He felt surprisingly small in the large leather chair. Mr. Pembroke, Alexander began, launching into his pitch. I know the sudden acquisition of our debt by your reputable institution has raised questions, but I assure you, Titan AI is stronger than ever. My recent personal restructuring was necessary to align my public image with the company's future trajectory. We are about to launch a chip that will revolutionize. Be quiet, Mr. Blackwood, Pembroke said. His voice wasn't loud, but it stopped Alexander mid-sentence like a physical slap. Excuse me? We have audited your company. You are over-leveraged by 400%. You have been siphoning corporate funds for personal use at an alarming rate in the last 3 weeks. And you triggered the morality clause in your loan agreement by publicly humiliating your wife of 5 years to cavort with a social media personality. Alexander felt sweat prickle under his collar. Now see here. My private life is none of your concern. I can cover the interest payments. We don't want the interest payments, Pembroke cut in. We want the principal. The Royal Sovereign Trust is calling in the loan. All of it. $600 million. Payable within 48 hours. Marcus whimpered audibly. Alexander stood up, his face red. That's impossible. That will bankrupt the company. You can't do that. I demand to speak to the actual owner of this trust. You're just a manager, Pembroke. Who do I have to charm to make this go away? I know these European royals. They all have a price." Pembroke stared at Alexander for a long, uncomfortable moment. A strange, almost pitying look crossed his face. "You wish to speak to the chair of the board, the primary shareholder?" Pembroke asked. "Yes. Right now." "Very well," Pembroke said. She insisted on being present for this part, anyway. Pembroke pushed a button on the intercom. "Your Royal Highness, we are ready for you." "Your Royal Highness?" Alexander thought, confused. A side door near the head of the table opened. The sound of sharp heels clicking on marble echoed through the silent room. Alexander turned, ready to turn on the charm, ready to flirt with whatever elderly duchess walked through the door. But it wasn't an elderly duchess. A woman walked in. She was tall, radiating an icy power that seemed to drop the temperature in the room by 10 degrees. She wore a perfectly tailored deep navy Dior suit that accentuated a figure Alexander hadn't noticed in years. Her blonde hair, usually tied up in a messy knot with pencils stuck in it, was styled in sleek, glossy waves around her face. On her lapel, a sapphire lion with diamond eyes glinted dangerously under the chandelier lights. Alexander stared. His brain refused to process what his eyes were seeing. It looked like Victoria, but it couldn't be Victoria. Victoria wore cardigans. Victoria smelled like old books and vanilla. This woman smelled like rare orchids and cold, hard cash. She didn't look at him. She walked to the head of the table, past Pembroke, and stood behind the massive chair meant for the sovereign. Only then did she raise her eyes, those piercing blue eyes that he had ignored for years. Alexander's mouth fell open. "Victoria? What are you doing here? Did you get a job as an assistant?" He laughed nervously, looking at Pembroke. "Is this a joke? You hired my ex-wife." Victoria ignored him. She placed a single, slim manila folder on the table. "Mr. Pembroke," Victoria said, her voice cool, authoritative, and ringing with an aristocratic accent Alexander had never heard her use. "Bring me up to speed. Has Mr. Blackwood been informed of the foreclosure protocols?" "Victoria, stop it," Alexander said, stepping forward, his confusion turning to anger. "What is this game? You don't talk like that. You're a librarian from Queen's." Victoria finally turned her head slowly and looked directly at him. The look was so withering that Alexander actually took a step back. "Sit down, Alexander," she commanded. It wasn't a request. It was an order. He sat. "You seem confused," she said, resting her hands on the table. The sapphire lion glinted. "Let me clarify the situation for you. You are correct that I was a librarian. I enjoy books. They are quiet, unlike you." She leaned forward slightly. "But you were incorrect about my origins. You never asked, did you? In 5 years, you never once asked about my family in Europe. You just assumed I was poor because I didn't wear labels and didn't care for your shallow parties." Alexander was frozen, his mind racing back through 5 years of marriage. The vague answers she gave about her childhood, the trips to Europe to visit an ailing aunt, the fluency in French and German that she downplayed. "Allow me to reintroduce myself," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in velvet. "I am not just Victoria Blackwood. I am Her Royal Highness, Princess Victoria Adelaide Antoinette Grimaldi of Valoria. My family has ruled our principality for 600 years, and my family owns the Royal Sovereign Trust." She paused to let the words sink in. She watched the blood drain entirely from Alexander's face, leaving him greyish-white. "Which means, Alexander," she whispered, a terrifying smile touching the corners of her lips, I own you." The silence in the boardroom stretched until it became suffocating. The only sound was a soft thump as Marcus O'Connell, the CFO of Titan AI, actually fainted, sliding out of his chair onto the thick Persian rug. Nobody moved to help him. Alexander stared at the woman at the head of the table. His brain was misfiring, trying to reconcile the image of his quiet, cardigan-wearing wife with this imposing figure dripping in sapphire authority. "A princess?" Alexander choked out, his voice cracking. He tried to laugh, but it sounded like a dry cough. "Vicky, come on. This is an elaborate joke, right? You hired actors. You're from Queens. We ate ramen noodles on a mattress on the floor our first year." Victoria, Princess Victoria, didn't even blink. "I lived in Queens because I chose to experience life outside the palace walls. I ate ramen because I wanted to know what it felt like to build something from nothing. You, Alexander, were my experiment in normality, an experiment that has tragically failed." She tapped a manicured finger on the file in front of her. "Mr. Pembroke, please escort Mr. O'Connell out. He's useless to us. I will deal with Mr. Blackwood alone." Pembroke nodded and dragged the groggy CFO out of the room. The heavy doors boomed shut, locking Alexander in with his worst nightmare. The moment they were alone, Alexander's shock morphed into a slick, desperate charm. He took a step toward her, his famous investor smile plastered on his face. "Vicky, baby," he started, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. "Okay, wow, you got me. This is huge. Why didn't you tell me? We could have been a power couple. Think about it. Titan AI backed by royal money. We'd rule the world." He reached out to touch her arm, a habit born of 5 years of taking her for granted. "Do not touch me," Victoria said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the absolute finality of a guillotine blade. Alexander froze. He saw something in her eyes he'd never seen before, genuine revulsion. "You lost the right to touch me when you served me divorce papers between the appetizer and the main course," she said coldly. "You called me plain. You called me an embarrassment. You said I fit the life you left behind." She stood up slowly, towering over him in her heels. "Look at me now, Alexander. Do I look plain to you?" He gulped. She looked terrifyingly beautiful. She looked like a goddess of vengeance. "I was stressed, Victoria. It was the business talking. I didn't mean it. Let's tear up those papers. Let's start over. I'll dump Chantel today. Right now. Watch." He fumbled for his phone. Victoria laughed, a chilling, crystalline sound. "Oh, Alexander, you really don't understand what's happening, do you?" She picked up a document from the table and threw it toward him. It slid across the polished wood. It was the divorce settlement agreement, the prenup he had forced her to sign. "You were so eager to be rid of me, you didn't even wait for your lawyer to file it," Victoria said. "You signed it. Then I signed it. As of 9 a.m. this morning, when my legal team filed it with the city clerk, we are officially divorced. You are a single man, Alexander." Alexander stared at the paper. He had signed away his connection to her. He had signed away his safety net. "But the $50,000, he stammered. "I gave you." "Keep it," she said, echoing his words from the restaurant. "You're going to need it, because as of this moment, the Royal Sovereign Trust is commencing foreclosure proceedings on Titan AI. We are seizing your assets, your intellectual property, and your personal holdings used as collateral." "You can't. The penthouse is in my name." "The penthouse was collateral for your Series B funding round," she corrected him. "It's ours. You have 24 hours to vacate. I believe Chantel will find moving out quite tedious." Alexander felt the room spinning. Everything he had built, everything that defined him, was dissolving. "Why?" he whispered, tears of rage and fear stinging his eyes. "If you had all this money, why did you let me struggle? Why did you let me take out these loans?" Victoria's expression softened, just for a fraction of a second, into profound sadness. "Because I loved you, you idiot. I wanted you to succeed on your own merits. I wanted to see if the man I married was worthy of the throne he was trying to build. But you weren't building a throne, Alexander. You were just digging a very expensive hole." She pressed a button on the intercom. "Security, please remove Mr. Blackwood from the premises and ensure his building pass is deactivated." Two massive security guards materialized. Alexander was escorted out of the boardroom, past the oil paintings of Victoria's ancestors, who all seemed to be sneering at him. He was shoved into an elevator, a billionaire who had just lost $4 billion in 45 minutes. The next 24 hours were a blur of panic and denial for Alexander. He returned to the 157 penthouse to find chaos. Chantel was throwing expensive luggage around, screaming at her assistant on the phone. "What do you mean my card declined at Cartier?" Chantel shrieked, throwing a diamond bracelet across the room. It hit a vase, shattering it. Alexander walked in, looking like a ghost. "Chantel, shut up!" he snapped, loosening his tie, feeling like it was strangling him. She whirled on him. "Alex, fix this!" The doorman looked at me weird. "My card isn't working, and TMZ is posting something about your company stock crashing?" It was true. The news of the Royal Sovereign Trust calling in the loan had leaked. Victoria's doing, no doubt. Titan AI stock was in freefall. It had dropped 40% since this morning. His net worth was vaporizing by the second. "It's just a hiccup," Alexander lied, pouring himself a scotch with shaking hands. "Banking error. I straightened it out." "You better have," Chantel huffed, examining her nails. "Tonight is the tech gala at the Met. I have a custom Versace gown coming. If I walk that red carpet and people think you're broke, I will literally die. My brand cannot handle poor." The gala. Alexander had forgotten. The biggest night of the New York social calendar. He was supposed to be the keynote speaker, celebrating his success. "We're going," Alexander said firmly. A plan formed in his desperate mind. If he showed up, looked rich, acted confident, he could calm the markets. He could find new investors at the party. He could spin this. "Get dressed," he ordered Chantel. "We need to look like $1 billion. Tonight is everything." While Alexander was desperately trying to glue his crumbling empire back together with scotch and lies, Victoria was preparing for war on the Upper East Side. The Valorian townhouse was buzzing. Her grandmother, the Grand Duchess, a woman who once made a Russian oligarch cry at a G20 summit, had arrived. "Stand still, Victoria," the Grand Duchess commanded, examining her granddaughter. Victoria stood on a pedestal in the center of her dressing room. She was wearing a creation that Jean-Luc Dubois had flown in personally. It was a gown of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light, tailored so perfectly it looked like it was painted on her skin. It was regal, imposing, and undeniably expensive. "The neck is bare," the Grand Duchess noted critically. "I didn't want to overdo it, Grandmère." The Grand Duchess scoffed. "Tonight is not about subtlety, child. Tonight is about power. Bring the case." Bartholomew stepped forward, carrying a velvet-covered steel case handcuffed to his wrist. He unlocked it. Inside lay the Valorian sapphire suite, a necklace, earrings, and tiara, made of sapphires the size of quail eggs, surrounded by hundreds of flawless diamonds. They hadn't been worn in public since Victoria's mother passed away 15 years ago. Victoria's breath caught. "Are you sure? These belong in the vault. They belong on a princess who is taking back her dignity," the Grand Duchess said, placing the heavy, cold necklace around Victoria's throat. She stepped back. The transformation was total. The librarian was dead. Long live the princess. "Go," the Grand Duchess said. "Show that little man what real royalty looks like." "And Victoria?" "Yes. Don't break him too quickly. It's more fun to watch them squirm." The red carpet outside the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a frenzy of flashbulbs and screaming fans. It was the annual Innovators' Ball. A black limousine pulled up. Alexander got out, forcing a blinding white smile. He wore a Tom Ford tuxedo that felt suddenly too tight. He extended a hand to Chantel. Chantel emerged, a vision in neon pink Versace, feathers, and too much fake tan. She immediately started posing for the cameras, blowing kisses. But the reception was chilly. The reporters weren't asking, "Who are you wearing?" They were shouting, "Mr. Blackwood, is it true Titan AI is facing liquidity issues?" "Alex, comment on the stock drop." Alexander ignored them, hustling Chantel up the stairs. "Keep smiling," he hissed at her. They reached the top of the stairs, ready to make their grand entrance into the great hall. Then, a hush fell over the crowd below. The shouting stopped. The camera shutters went silent for a split second. A vintage maroon Rolls-Royce Phantom 6, the kind used by actual monarchs, had pulled up to the carpet. The driver, in full livery, opened the back door. First, a navy velvet stiletto stepped out. Then, Princess Victoria emerged. The silence broke with a collective gasp that rippled through the hundreds of people present. She didn't stop for photos. She glided. The midnight blue velvet flowed around her like dark water. The sapphires at her throat caught the camera flashes and fractured the light into 1,000 blue daggers. Her blonde hair was swept up, crowned by the diamond tiara that glinted with centuries of history. She looked untouchable. She looked immensely, terrifyingly wealthy. Alexander, standing at the top of the stairs, turned to see what everyone was looking at. His breath left his body. He recognized the face, but nothing else. The woman walking up the stairs toward him wasn't the wife he had discarded. She was a queen coming to claim her territory. Chantel popped her gum, squinting. "Who is that? Her dress is amazing. Wait, Alex, isn't that your ex-wife? The boring librarian?" Victoria reached the top of the stairs. She didn't stop. She walked straight past Alexander as if he were a piece of insignificant furniture. The scent of rare orchids and cold air trailed behind her. As she passed him, she didn't even turn her head, but she spoke just loud enough for him to hear. "Happy anniversary, Alexander." The great hall of the Metropolitan Museum of Art was a cavern of echoing opulence, transformed for the night into a playground for the 0.01%. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume, lilies, and the distinct metallic tang of chilled Osetra caviar. But for Alexander Blackwood, the atmosphere felt suffocating, heavy with a humidity that had nothing to do with the weather and everything to do with the shifting tides of power. Alexander stood near the base of the Temple of Dender, the ancient Egyptian sandstone glowing ethereally under the soft, amber uplighting. In his hand, a glass of 30-year-old single malt warmed, untouched. He wore his tuxedo like armor, a bespoke Tom Ford creation that usually made him feel invincible. Tonight, however, it felt like a costume, a disguise he was wearing to convince the world, and perhaps himself, that he still belonged here. Beside him, Chantel was busy documenting her existence. She held her phone high, pouting for a selfie with the temple in the background, the flash of her screen illuminating the boredom in her eyes. "This lighting is tragic, Alex," she complained, snapping her gum, a sound that cut through the refined hum of conversation, like a gunshot. "And why is no one coming over to us? Usually we're swarmed. I need content for the vlog. Did you see the view count on my Get Ready With Me? It's tanking. Alexander didn't answer. His eyes were scanning the room, darting from face to face, looking for an ally. He saw Jonathan Gray, the real estate tycoon, laughing near the bar. He saw the editor-in-chief of Vanity Fair whispering with a movie star. Alexander straightened his spine, adjusted his cufflinks, and made his move. "Jonathan!" Alexander called out, forcing the trademark Blackwood smile, the one that had closed billion-dollar deals. "I wanted to talk to you about the Hudson Yards expansion. I have some ideas about the AI integration." Jonathan turned. The smile on his face didn't reach his eyes. It was the polite, shark-like grimace of a man who smells blood in the water. "Alexander," Jonathan said, his voice dropping an octave. "Interesting timing. I heard some disturbing news from the London Exchange this afternoon. Something about the Royal Sovereign Trust invoking a distress clause." Alexander felt a cold bead of sweat roll down his spine. "Rumours, John. You know how the market is. Just a bureaucratic mix-up with the European lenders. We're sorting it out. In fact, I'm expecting a fresh injection of capital by Monday." Jonathan took a slow sip of his champagne, his eyes drifting over Alexander's shoulder. "I don't think so, Alex. My team at Goldman tells me your patents were seized an hour ago. You don't have the IP anymore. You're selling a car without an engine." Before Alexander could protest, Jonathan took a step back. "I'd love to chat, but I see someone I actually need to do business with. Good luck, Alex. You're going to need it." Jonathan walked away, leaving Alexander standing in a void of social isolation. It was happening. The freeze out. In high society, you don't get yelled at. You just get erased. "Rude," Chantel muttered, looking up from her phone. "Who was that old guy, anyway? He has zero drip." "Shut up, Chantel," Alexander hissed, the panic finally cracking his voice. "Just stand there and look expensive. That's your only job." Suddenly, the ambient chatter in the massive hall died down. It wasn't a gradual silence. It was an instant, collective hush, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. The lights dimmed, focusing a single, brilliant spotlight on the center stage in front of the temple. The museum's director stepped to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, tonight is a night of history. We are celebrating not just innovation, but heritage. And we are honored to welcome our new primary benefactor. Please welcome the chairwoman of the Valorian Sovereign Council, Her Royal Highness, Princess Victoria." Alexander's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. Victoria. She emerged from the shadows of the temple, stepping into the light. The collective gasp of the crowd was audible. If Alexander had thought she looked good in the boardroom, tonight she looked like a deity. She was wearing the midnight blue velvet gown, but now, under the museum lights, the Valorian sapphire suite was blinding. The necklace, a cascade of deep blue stones surrounded by diamonds, rested on her collarbone with the weight of 600 years of history. A delicate diamond tiara crowned her blonde hair, which was swept up in an intricate chignon. She didn't walk. She floated. Her posture was perfect, her chin held high, her expression serene and unreadable. She was a woman who owned the room, not because she had bought it, but because she had been born to rule it. She reached the podium, adjusting the microphone with a gloved hand. Her blue eyes scanned the crowd, confident and clear. "Thank you," she began, her voice echoing through the silent hall. It was the voice of the woman Alexander had married, but stripped of the timidity, stripped of the apology. "For years I have walked among you quietly. I have observed what this city values. I have seen how quickly it elevates the loud, the flashy, and the new." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the audience. For a fleeting second, her eyes locked onto Alexander's. He felt stripped naked, exposed for the fraud he was. "But true value," Victoria continued, her voice gaining strength, "is not found in the fluctuating price of a stock. It is not found in the number of followers you have, or the brand on your lapel. True value is found in integrity, in loyalty, in the things that cannot be bought, only earned. My family has protected our legacy for centuries, not by chasing the next big thing, but by honoring our roots." She smiled, a small, dangerous curve of her lips. "I recently learned a hard lesson about the difference between price and value. I watched someone throw away a diamond because he was too busy chasing glitter. Tonight, I am here to pledge 100 million to the restoration of this court, to ensure that true art, that which is real and lasting, survives." The applause that followed was deafening. It was the sound of allegiance shifting. The room had a new queen, and Alexander Blackwood was officially deposed. As Victoria stepped down from the stage, surrounded by a phalanx of admirers, Michael Bloomberg, the Olsen twins, the head of the Federal Reserve, Alexander felt a surge of manic desperation. He couldn't let it end like this. He had to fix it. He could charm her. He could remind her of the good times. "Stay here," he ordered Chantel, pushing past a waiter. He shoved his way through the crowd, ignoring the glares of the people he bumped into. He reached the edge of the VIP circle, just as Victoria was accepting a glass of champagne from a waiter. "Victoria!" Alexander shouted. The sound of his voice, raw and desperate, cut through the polite congratulations. The circle around her parted, not out of respect for him, but out of the morbid curiosity of watching a car crash. Victoria turned slowly. She handed her glass to an aide and looked at him. There was no anger in her face. There was something far worse, indifference. "Alexander," she said, her tone level, "you are making a scene. Again." "We need to talk," Alexander panted, sweat visible on his forehead. He reached out to grab her arm, but a massive security guard stepped forward. Victoria raised a hand, halting the guard. "Let him speak," she said softly. "It's his closing argument." "Vicky, please," Alexander lowered his voice, trying to create an intimacy that no longer existed. "I know you're angry. You have every right to be. I was an idiot. But look at us. Look at what we could do together now. I built Titan AI for us. I wanted to be worthy of you." Victoria laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "Worthy of me? Alexander, when I met you, I was worth billions. I didn't need you to be rich. I needed you to be good. I needed you to be the man who read poetry to me on the fire escape in Queens. Instead, you became this." She gestured vaguely at his tuxedo, his face, his entire existence. This hollow shell of a man who measures his self-worth by the reflection in others' eyes. "I can change," Alexander pleaded, tears pricking his eyes. "I'll sign a post-nup. I'll give up the CEO title. Just don't destroy me. Don't take the company. It's my baby." Victoria took a step closer, the scent of rare orchids overwhelming his senses. "You didn't build that company, Alex. My trust fund did. I signed the guarantor loans 5 years ago, when no bank in America would touch you. I bought your debt. I paid your payroll when you missed it in 2021. You thought you were a self-made man. You were a scholarship student in the school of my patience, and you just flunked out." She turned to walk away. "I still love you," Alexander screamed, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. Victoria stopped. She didn't turn back. "No, Alexander. You love the reflection of yourself you saw in my eyes when I looked at you with adoration. But the mirror is broken. You're on your own." She walked away, the velvet of her dress trailing behind her, like the dark water closing over a sinking ship. Alexander stood there, trembling. He felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see Chantel. She wasn't holding her phone anymore. She was holding the yellow diamond engagement ring he had given her, the ring bought with the company credit card that was now cancelled. "So," Chantel said, her voice dripping with disdain, "I googled it. It's true. You're totally washed." "Chantel, not now," Alexander groaned. "Actually, exactly now," she snapped. She looked at the ring, then back at him. "You know, the jeweler told me this had a flaw in it. I guess that makes sense now. Cheap ring for a cheap man." She dropped the ring into his champagne glass. It landed with a pathetic clink, splashing whiskey onto his tuxedo shirt. "I'm going to the after-party with the guy from Spotify," she said, smoothing her neon pink dress. "Don't follow me. You ruin the aesthetic." She spun on her heel and marched away, the crowd parting for her neon plumage, leaving Alexander standing alone in the center of the room. He looked down at the ring in the amber liquid. He looked up at the room. People were staring, whispering. Some were even taking photos of him. The titan, the genius, the billionaire. A waiter appeared at his elbow. He looked distinctively unimpressed. "Sir?" the waiter said. "Get me another drink," Alexander rasped. "I'm afraid I can't do that, Mr. Blackwood," the waiter said, his voice loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "We've been instructed by the event host, Her Royal Highness, that your invitation has been revoked. Security is waiting to escort you out." "I can walk myself out," Alexander spat, straightening his jacket with a shred of remaining dignity. He turned toward the grand staircase leading to the main exit. "Not that way, sir," the waiter corrected him, pointing a gloved hand toward a nondescript grey door near the kitchens. "The VIP exit is for guests. The service exit is to your left." Alexander froze. He looked at the grand staircase, then at the grey door. He looked at the crowd, waiting for someone, anyone, to intervene. To say, "Wait, that's Alexander Blackwood." But no one did. They had already turned their backs, their attention returning to the princess at the head table. Alexander Blackwood lowered his head. He walked to the grey door, pushed it open, and stepped out into the cold, rain-slicked alleyway behind the museum. The heavy steel door clicked shut behind him, locking him out of the world he had sacrificed his soul to enter. 8 months later. The winter in New Jersey was harsher than Alexander remembered. The heating in his studio apartment in Hoboken rattled and wheezed, never quite getting the room warm enough. Alexander sat at a folding card table, the only furniture he had kept aside from a mattress. His laptop sat open. He was working as a freelance consultant for a mid-sized logistics firm, correcting their spreadsheet formulas for $40 an hour. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from the Wall Street Journal app. Headline: Valoria Tech shares hit record high as Princess Victoria announces global clean energy initiative. He clicked the article. There was a photo of her. She looked older, wiser, but radiant. She was cutting a ribbon on a wind farm in the North Sea. She looked happy. Alexander closed the laptop. He stood up and walked to the small kitchenette to heat up a cup of instant noodles. As he waited for the water to boil, he glanced at the bookshelf made of cinder blocks and plywood. There was only one book on it, a first edition of The Great Gatsby. The cover was water-damaged and stained with wine from the night he had fished it out of the trash, but the pages were still readable. He picked it up and opened it to the last page. He read the line he had memorized, the line that now defined his existence. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. He closed the book, sat down on the floor, and ate his dinner in the silence of a life he had built with his own 2 hands. And that is the story of Alexander Blackwood and Princess Victoria. It's a brutal reminder that when you marry someone, you aren't just marrying a face or a status. You're marrying a human being with a history, a soul, and sometimes a secret that can change your life. Alexander chased the glitter of gold and lost the diamond he already held in his hand. He learned too late that the quietest person in the room is often the most powerful. Wow, what a roller coaster. I honestly think Alexander got exactly what he deserved. It's so satisfying to see Victoria step into her power like that. My favorite part was definitely the "service exit is to your left" line. Ouch. What do you guys think? Was Victoria too harsh, or did Alexander deserve to lose everything? And would you have read that letter at the end? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of royal revenge and karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a drama-filled story time. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.